Hey everyone, and welcome back. We got a request recently to dig a bit deeper into the idea of telos. And, well, let's just say it's a word that might sound kind of intimidating at first, maybe like something you'd hear in a philosophy lecture. But trust me on this one.
It's actually a really practical concept.
Exactly. And once you start to grasp it, it can completely change the way you view the world around you, your place in it, even your everyday choices.
It really is a fascinating concept, even if it's been around for centuries.
Right. So before we go full-on philosophy nerd here, let's define our terms.
Yeah.
When we talk about telos, what exactly are we talking about?
Well, in the simplest terms, telos refers to the ultimate end, the purpose or the goal of something.
So it's not just about what something is, but what it's for.
Exactly. It's about understanding the driving force, the very reason something exists in the first place.
Okay, I like where this is going. Now, we have to give credit where credit is due, right? I mean, the concept of telos goes all the way back to ancient Greece and a pretty famous philosopher by the name of Aristotle. Oh, absolutely. Aristotle was, you could say, obsessed with understanding the purpose of, well, everything.
So what was Aristotle's big idea when it came to telos? How did he use it to explain, well, everything?
He believed that everything has a telos, a unique and inherent purpose that it's striving towards.
Okay, so not just hammers and nails, but like trees and oceans and even us.
Everything, even, as you said, us. He believed that understanding the telos of something was key to understanding its true nature.
Okay, I gotta be honest, this is starting to sound a little Lion King, circle of life to me. Is everything really connected in some grand cosmic dance of purpose?
Well, Aristotle might have said yes, but to understand how he got there, we need to talk about what he called the final cause.
Ooh, final cause. That sounds kind of ominous, like the end of all things.
It's not that dramatic, I promise. Think of it this way. The final cause of something is its inherent purpose, its ultimate reason for being. So, to use a simple example, the final cause of a hammer is to drive nails.
Makes sense. You wouldn't use a hammer to, like, stir your coffee.
Exactly, unless you're going for a very specific type of coffee experience.
I'll stick to my spoon for now, but I get your point.
And that's what Aristotle was getting at. Everything has this kind of built-in what for attached to it. It's not just an object, it has a purpose. And this applies not just to tools, but to living things, natural phenomena, even human actions in institutions.
So how does this whole everything has a purpose thing actually play out in, real life? Like, what would be an example of telos in action?
Well, Aristotle believed that even our seemingly insignificant actions, like, say, organizing that bookshelf, contribute to a larger telos.
Okay, so you're saying my love of alphabetizing my books has a bigger purpose in the universe. I'm totally down with that.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
But it highlights how our individual actions can connect to something larger. He saw it as a kind of hierarchy of goals, like a pyramid.
A pyramid of purpose. I like the sound of that.
Exactly. At the base of this pyramid, you have those everyday actions, and each one contributes to a higher goal, eventually leading up to the overall well-being of society.
So it's like my organized bookshelf contributes to my well-being, which then radiates outwards to the well-being of my community and so on.
That's the idea. Aristotle actually used a really specific example to illustrate this whole hierarchy of goals thing. He talked about the telos of a blacksmith.
Oh, right. Something about blacksmiths and swords.
Exactly. So a blacksmith makes a sword, right? Their immediate telos is to create this perfect weapon, strong, sharp, ready for battle.
But obviously the sword isn't the ultimate goal, right?
Exactly. The sword is just a means to an end. It's a tool.
Okay, so then what? What's the bigger telos here?
Well, the soldier who uses that sword, they have a different telos altogether. Maybe it's to protect their city or to achieve victory in war. So you see how these layers of purpose stack up, each one connected to a larger goal.
Wow, yeah. Okay, I see what you mean. So it's like the blacksmith's skill contributes to the soldier's success, which then impacts the fate of the entire city and so on.
Precisely. And Aristotle believed that this whole intricate web of purpose ultimately leads to the telos of politics, the art of governing.
Okay, so politics is at the tippy top of this purpose pyramid. That's a lot of pressure on our elected officials.
Well, in Aristotle's view, politics was about organizing all those individual teloi, all those unique purposes, towards a common good, the why behind a well-functioning society.
Wow, when you put it that way, it really makes you think differently about the role of government, huh? It's not just about laws and policies, but about creating the conditions for everyone to fulfill their purpose.
That's a really good way of putting it. It's about aligning those individual pursuits with a collective good.
It's a lot to think about. But it's pretty amazing when you consider that this idea, this concept of telos, has been around for centuries.
It's pretty timeless. And it makes you wonder if Aristotle was onto something with this whole purpose-driven view of the world.
Right, like what if everything really does have a purpose, even if we don't always see it right away?
It's a question worth pondering. And it leads us to another key concept that Aristotle explored, one that's closely connected to telos. It's the idea of techne.
Techne. Okay, now we're really going deep into the Greek lexicon. What does that mean?
Techne refers to the skill, the art, the method we use to achieve our telos. Think of it as the how to the why.
The how to the why, I like that. So if my telos was, say, to become a musician, the techne would be all the practice, the dedication, the learning of musical theory, all of that.
Exactly. It's about the tools, the skills, the knowledge we use to actualize our purpose.
So it's not enough to just have a purpose, you need to have the means to achieve it, right?
Exactly. And this idea of techne is super relevant today, especially when we think about the role of technology in our lives.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So we're talking about how techne is like the bridge between our intentions and our actions, right? And technology often plays that role in our modern world.
Exactly. Think about it. Every piece of technology was created with a specific purpose in mind, a telos. But how we use that technology, that's where technique comes in. And sometimes our techne, our methods, can get a little off track from the intended purpose.
Oh, 100%. Like social media, for example. The telos might be connection and communication, but the way we actually use it sometimes feels like the opposite.
That's a great example. And that's why it's so crucial to be mindful of our techne, our methods, and to make sure they're truly aligned with the intended purpose, the telos of what we're doing.
It's like we have to constantly be checking ourselves, right? Making sure that how we're using these tools, these technologies, is actually serving a purpose that's, beneficial and meaningful.
Precisely. And that's a big part of what makes this exploration of telos so relevant to our lives today. It's not just an abstract philosophical concept. It's a lens through which we can view and evaluate our actions, our choices, and even the technologies we create and use.
It's a powerful idea. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that this whole everything has a purpose idea, it's not without its critics, right?
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that Aristotle's view isn't the only perspective out there. Some philosophers argue that not everything needs a grand purpose, a predetermined telos. Some things might just be random, just products of chance.
So it's not a simple black and white answer.
Not at all. And that's what makes it so interesting. Exactly. It's not about finding all the answers right away. It's about, asking those thought-provoking questions, those questions that make us really examine the world around us, even the ordinary stuff.
So instead of just sitting on a chair, we should be asking, why a chair in the first place?
Well, yeah. What's the purpose of a chair? What need does it fulfill? Why is it designed the way it is?
And how does that connect to the bigger picture of, human behavior, design principles, even societal norms?
Exactly. Suddenly, this ordinary object becomes a window into all these fascinating questions about purpose and design and the way we live our lives.
I never thought I'd get this philosophical about a chair. It's like Aristotle is whispering in my ear, look closer, find the purpose.
That's a great way to put it. Aristotle's ideas, they're not about, dictating what to think. It's about encouraging us to think more deeply about the world, about our actions, and how everything is connected.
So to our listeners out there, we'll leave you with this. As you go about your day, keep an eye out for telos in your own life. What are the whys behind your actions? What are the purposes, the things you use every day, the systems you interact with? And maybe, just maybe, ask yourself, what's your own personal telos? What's that driving force behind your own life? Until next time, keep those philosophical gears turning.
All right, strap in everyone, because today we're diving deep into the Trojan War. We all know the basics, right? Helen of Troy, stolen love, 1,000 ships launching to get her back.
A story for the ages.
But there's so much more to uncover.
Oh, absolutely.
Layers upon layers to this epic saga.
Intrigue, betrayal, divine intervention, you name it, the Trojan War has it.
So get ready to explore the myths, the legends, even the historical whispers surrounding this legendary conflict.
We're talking gods and monsters, prophecies, betrayals, A war that raged on for, well, a decade.
A decade.
Yeah.
It all begins, as so many great stories do, with a wedding.
Of course.
But this wasn't your average wedding. This was the wedding of Thetis,
Well, Venus.
a sea nymph,
Right.
marrying a mortal king named Peleus.
A match made, well, you could say in Olympus.
Okay, so maybe not Olympus, but definitely a match with some serious divine intervention.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of divine intervention, we can't forget the guest list, or rather one very important guest who wasn't invited. Beerus, the goddess of discord.
Eris. Yeah. Talk about your wedding crasher. She was known for stirring up trouble.
Yeah, I can see how that wouldn't make her a favorite at parties.
Right. So when she's snubbed from this wedding, well, let's just say she RSVP'd in a way no one could ignore.
Oh boy, this is where it gets good.
She tosses a golden apple into the wedding feast, inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." Can you imagine?
Talk about an icebreaker.
More like a war starter.
Right. That single apple, it ignited this whole vanity contest among the goddesses, right?
Exactly. Hera, Athena, Aphrodite, they all wanted to be the fairest of the hall, and it all culminated in the infamous Judgment of Paris.
Okay, so for those who need a refresher, who is this Paris guy, and what was this judgment all about?
Right, so Paris, he was a Trojan prince.
Trojan prince.
Yeah, and he gets chosen to judge which goddess is the most beautiful.
What an awkward situation to be put in. No pressure, Paris. Right. And to make things even more interesting, each goddess offered him a bribe. Hera offered him power, Athena offered wisdom, but it was Aphrodite's promise of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, that sealed the deal.
And that's when all hell breaks loose, right?
Pretty much.
Because Helen, well, she wasn't exactly single.
She was married to Menelaus, the king of Sparta.
And that's putting it mildly. This wasn't just some love triangle. This was a major diplomatic incident waiting to explode.
Absolutely. This was about honor, revenge. Remember Xenia?
Refresh us.
That ancient Greek concept of hospitality. It was sacred. And Paris, by abducting Helen, well, he violated that bond in the most offensive way possible.
He basically threw down the gauntlet.
Oh, more than that. He sparked a war that would engulf the entire Greek world. Don't forget, Helen's suitors had all sworn an oath to protect her marriage.
Right, the Oath of Tyndareus. So when Paris broke that oath, it was like a domino effect, pulling all these different kingdoms into this massive conflict.
Exactly. And at the forefront of this conflict was Agamemnon,
Menelaus' brother.
the most powerful king in Greece.
He wasn't about to let this slide.
Not a chance. But here's where it gets even more interesting. This Trojan War, it wasn't just a human conflict. It was part of a bigger picture.
You're talking about the gods, right? Those meddling gods, always pulling the strings.
Always. See, Zeus, he had a bit of a prophecy problem.
Oh, right. The prophecy about Thetis, our blushing bride from earlier. The prophecy that she would bear a son mightier than his father.
Exactly. Can you imagine living with that kind of pressure to know your own child could overthrow you?
I mean, talk about family drama.
Right. And Zeus, he'd already seen this happen to his own father, Cronus.
So what's a god to do?
Well, if you're Zeus, you orchestrate a little divine intervention.
You mean a war?
A war to end all wars. A way to thin out the ranks of the demigods, those offspring of gods and mortals, always causing trouble.
Bit of celestial population control.
You could say that. And within this war, prophecies were everywhere. They acted like guideposts, offering glimpses into the future, shaping the conflict's trajectory.
Like a sneak peek into Destiny's playbook.
Exactly. And one of the most significant prophecies was the one about Troy itself. It was foretold that Troy would fall, but not until the 10th year of the war.
Talk about a slow burn. It's like a 10-season TV show where you already know the ending but can't resist watching how it all unfolds.
And just like a good TV show, the Trojan War has its share of subplots and unexpected characters. Remember Telephus?
Telephus. Who was he again?
He was a king. Got caught up in the whole thing quite accidentally.
Accidentally? How do you accidentally get caught up in the Trojan War?
Well, let's just say he found himself on the wrong end of Achilles' spear.
Ouch.
Yeah. He was actually trying to prevent the Greeks from setting sail for Troy in the first place. And the irony is, his story, although seemingly just a footnote in the grand scheme of things, it actually foreshadows a key theme of the entire war. Fate has a way of intervening, even when you least expect it.
It's like those moments in movies where you know something bad is about to happen, but you just can't look away.
Precisely. And trust me, there are plenty more of those moments to come.
It's a good thing these heroes didn't have crystal balls. Could you imagine? Knowing your fate before it unfolds.
Right. Talk about a buzzkill, but also maybe a lifesaver.
A toss-up for sure. But since we're on the topic of unexpected twists and turns, let's talk about the Achaean forces. These weren't just a ragtag bunch of sailors, were they?
Not at all. We're talking about a massive, well-organized army. And thankfully, we have something pretty incredible that gives us a glimpse into their world.
You mean Homer's catalog of ships? I think it's like an ancient phone book of who's who in the Greek army.
It's an epic list, over 1,000 ships. Imagine trying to organize that on a battlefield, let alone the open sea.
And each ship representing a different contingent of soldiers, all answering Agamemnon's call to arms. It boggles the mind.
It really does. And it's not just the sheer number of ships, although, let's be honest, over 1,000 is pretty impressive. It's the organizational structure it reveals. This catalog of ships, it lists contingents from every corner of the Greek world, each with its own leaders, specialties, even dialects, I'd imagine.
It really makes you wonder, could this catalog be more than just, a literary device? I mean, some scholars believe it might be based on an actual Bronze Age document, a real-life echo from this legendary past. What do you think about that?
It's a tantalizing idea. I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but even if it's a later creation, it speaks volumes about how deeply the Greeks valued military prowess and organization. These weren't just stories to them. This was their history, their heritage, passed down through generations.
And they took their warfare seriously.
Oh, absolutely.
But this wasn't just about brute strength, was it? There was strategy involved, too.
Plenty of it. The Greeks, they were known for their cunning on the battlefield.
And no one embodies that cunning more than Odysseus.
Ah, Odysseus. The original smooth talker.
He was full of tricks. But we'll get to his story a bit later.
Right, because before we delve into the fall of Troy, we have to spend some time with the events, the battles, even the quieter moments of those 9 long years before the Trojan horse ever saw the light of day.
9 years. It's hard to wrap your head around that kind of time scale. And we only get a glimpse of the final year in Homer's Iliad.
Right, the Iliad is like the climax of the story, the final act. But what about those years leading up to it? Those were filled with their own share of campaigns, alliances made and broken, even love stories, believe it or not.
And tragedies. Don't forget the tragedies.
Oh, yes, plenty of those. War is never without its casualties.
And those casualties weren't always just on the battlefield. Take, for instance, the story of Iphigenia,
A heartbreaking tale.
Agamemnon's daughter, sacrificed to appease the goddess Artemis. Can you imagine the weight of that decision? Choose between your own child and the fate of your entire army.
An impossible choice. But that's the thing about Greek mythology. It often forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about humanity, about the choices we make in the face of extraordinary circumstances.
And speaking of choices, we can't forget Achilles.
Oh, Achilles, the greatest warrior of his age.
But also a man of contradictions, driven by glory, but also prone to fits of rage. And it's in those earlier years of the war that we really see his character take shape.
He was practically invincible on the battlefield.
Right. Leading raids, conquering cities, amassing a fair amount of loot along the way.
He was a force of nature. But even forces of nature have their weaknesses. And for Achilles, it was his pride. And of course, his love for Briseis.
Briseis. Right. The woman he captures during one of his raids. And the reason for his whole falling out with Agamemnon.
That's the thing about the Trojan War. It's all connected, one event leading to another, one betrayal fueling the next. It's a tangled web of fate, free will, and some seriously bad decisions.
And speaking of bad decisions, let's not forget about Palamedes.
Palamedes. A brilliant strategist, but ultimately a victim of Odysseus's cunning.
Accused of treason, right?
Yes. And stoned to death by his own comrades.
A tragic end. And one that would have serious consequences for the Greeks. Remember his father, Nauplius.
Driven by grief and rage, he swore revenge on the Greeks. He would become instrumental in their downfall, even if indirectly.
His actions set off a chain reaction that would eventually lead to Agamemnon's own demise. But that's a story for another time. For now, let's focus on the war itself. It's amazing how one betrayal can have such far-reaching consequences, isn't it? Like a ripple effect through history.
It's true. And in the case of the Trojan War, those ripples, they often carried the weight of fate, of tragedy.
And nowhere is that weight felt more heavily than in the final stages of the war.
Yeah.
The tension, the drama, it all builds to a crescendo in those last chapters.
We're talking about a siege that had dragged on for 9 long years. The Greeks were, well, they were getting desperate.
And exhausted, I imagine. Can you imagine fighting a war for that long? It's unfathomable.
It really is. But they had come too far to give up. They needed a miracle, a sign, and as luck would have it, they got 2. 2 prophecies, in fact, that would change everything.
2 prophecies. It's like the gods were offering them a 2-for-1 deal on destiny.
Well, these prophecies were less of a deal and more like a roadmap to victory, but only if they could decipher them. The first prophecy, it declared that the Greeks would never conquer Troy without the bow of Heracles.
The bow of Heracles. Okay, so for those who might not remember, Heracles, we're talking about the ultimate Greek hero, right?
Exactly. A demigod known for his incredible strength, his legendary 12 labors.
And his bow.
A weapon of immense power, said to be imbued with the strength of the Hydra.
The Hydra. That many-headed serpent monster.
The very same. So you can see why the Greeks needed this bow if they were going to break through the walls of Troy.
It was like the ultimate weapon of its time. But there was a catch, wasn't there? This bow, it belonged to someone who wanted nothing to do with the war.
Philoctetes.
That's right. The guy who'd been abandoned on an island years earlier because of a snake bite. Talk about a raw deal.
And understandably, he was not too thrilled when the Greeks came knocking, begging for his help.
But eventually they managed to convince him.
With a little persuasion from Odysseus, of course.
Of course.
But the bow of Heracles, that was only half the equation. The second prophecy, it revolved around something called the Palladium.
The Palladium. What was that again? Something about a statue?
Yes, it was a sacred statue of Pallas Athena, believed to protect Troy from harm. As long as it remained within the city walls, Troy was essentially invincible.
So, naturally, the Greeks had to get their hands on it.
And who better to pull off such a daring heist than Odysseus?
The master of disguise. He snuck into Troy, disguised as a beggar, and stole the Palladium right out from under their noses.
Talk about a power move. With the bow of Heracles and the Palladium in their possession, the Greeks finally had the means to conquer Troy.
But they still had to figure out a way to get past those impenetrable city walls.
And that, my friend, is where the most enduring symbol of the Trojan War comes in. The Trojan horse.
Ah, the Trojan horse. A gift, they called it.
A symbol of peace, of surrender.
But little did the Trojans know.
That hidden within that hollow wooden belly
Were some of Greece's fiercest warriors, just waiting for the opportune moment to strike.
And strike they did. Under the cover of darkness, they emerged from their hiding place, opening the city gates for their comrades waiting outside. It was a scene of utter chaos.
The sack of Troy is one of the most brutal events in all of literature.
A night of unimaginable violence and destruction. Homer doesn't shy away from depicting the horrors of war, the cost of victory, even when it's presented as a foregone conclusion.
It's a sobering reminder that even in victory, there can be great sorrow. And the echoes of war, they can reverberate through generations.
The Trojan War might be a story, a myth, but its themes, they continue to resonate with us today. The desire for power, the bonds of loyalty, the devastating consequences of vengeance.
And ultimately, the power of stories themselves to endure, to teach us about the human condition, about the choices we make, and the sacrifices we make in the name of love, duty, and even revenge.
The Trojan War is a story that has captivated audiences for millennia. And its legacy, well, it continues to shape our understanding of history, of literature, and even ourselves.
It makes you wonder, what stories from our own time will become the myths and legends of the future? What events will shape the course of history for generations to come?
That's the beauty of studying the past. It offers us not just a glimpse into where we come from, but also a chance to reflect on who we are and where we might be headed.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the echoes of the Trojan War and what they mean to you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the mysteries of history.
Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today, we're going back in time to explore a tragedy that still fascinates people almost a century later, the Hindenburg Disaster.
Yeah, right, the Hindenburg, yeah.
The iconic airship that went up in flames.
It's one of those events.
It really is.
That captures the imagination, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And today, we're going to use excerpts from Wikipedia's entry on the Hindenburg Disaster to unpack not just what happened, but also explore the lingering questions about why it happened.
What's so compelling about the Hindenburg is that it really represented this peak, like the pinnacle of airship technology at the time. You know,
It did.
It was this luxurious, massive airship.
Yeah.
It seemed to promise a new era of transatlantic travel.
It really was like something out of a Jules Verne novel.
Right.
But that dream went up in smoke,
Yeah.
literally.
And the mystery behind what caused the fire is still debated today, even with all the eyewitness accounts and investigations and everything else, yeah.
Okay, so let's set the scene.
Right.
It's May 6, 1937. The Hindenburg, just finished its first transatlantic crossing of the season, is approaching Lakehurst, New Jersey.
Okay.
It's already running 12 hours behind schedule.
Wow.
Thanks to some bad weather.
Yeah.
Now, this delay actually added an interesting twist to the flight.
It did.
Imagine this. The Hindenburg,
Yeah.
this enormous airship,
Yeah.
is forced to circle over New York City while waiting for the storm to pass.
Oh, wow.
So not only did New Yorkers get this incredible seat of the airship flying over Manhattan,
That's cool.
but those on board got an extended tour of the city.
Oh, so they made the best of it, huh?
Talk about making the best of a bad situation.
Right.
But the weather delays kept causing problems,
Okay.
pushing the landing later and later into the evening, which meant that they had to scrap the planned ground festivities.
Oh, no.
And it really just added to the tension of the situation.
You can imagine, yeah.
And to top it off, the landing itself wasn't a simple thing. They were attempting a flying war.
A flying war,
Right.
which,
Fat.
if you can picture it,
Okay.
involved winching the airship down from a high altitude to the mooring mast using these ropes.
Oh, wow.
So it's like trying to park a giant floating blimp
Yeah.
in a very specific spot,
Yeah.
all while battling these strong winds.
Oh, yeah. Stressful.
Yeah,
Plus, I mean, the Hindenburg wasn't even really designed for that kind of landing, was it?
that's right. It wasn't.
It was really intended for, like, landings involving a ground crew, I think, right?
Right.
Not this flying more thing.
You can practically feel that pressure mounting
Yeah.
as the airship starts to descend.
You said it was already behind schedule.
Yeah, it was way behind
Well,
schedule.
the weather was bad.
And the weather was bad.
And the weather was bad.
So everyone's already on edge.
Everyone's on edge. And then in a terrifying instant,
Yeah.
the disaster unfolded
Wow.
in just 32 to 37 seconds.
That's unbelievable.
The Hindenburg went from a symbol of progress
Right.
to this raging inferno.
Yeah.
The speed
That's so fast.
at which the fire spread is just chilling.
Yeah.
It's really hard to fathom the chaos and terror of those moments.
I bet.
People jumping for their lives.
Oh my gosh.
Some making it, others tragically lost.
Oh, it's hard to even think about.
But even amidst that horror,
Yeah.
there were these incredible acts of bravery.
Yeah, like who?
Like Chief Petty Officer Frederick J. Tobin,
Yeah.
who helped lead the rescue efforts.
That's amazing, especially considering...
Well, that's even more amazing
Well,
because he was a survivor of another airship disaster,
what?
the crash of the USS Shenandoah.
Oh, wow.
So even after experiencing that firsthand,
Yeah.
he didn't hesitate to put himself at risk again to help others.
That's incredible.
So we've set the stage.
Okay.
But the big question remains,
Yeah.
what sparked that inferno?
What did?
Let's start with a theory that's often associated with mysteries and intrigue.
Okay. I like it.
Sabotage.
Sabotage. Okay.
This theory was fueled in part by Hugo Eckner, a prominent figure in the airship world
Uh-huh.
and former head of the Zeppelin company.
Okay.
He actually pointed to threatening letters that the Hindenburg had received
What?
before the flight
Before the flight.
as a possible motive.
Oh, wow. So there were threats.
There were threats.
That's creepy.
And then there's the story of Erich Spell,
Right.
a rigger on the Hindenburg,
Okay.
who was named as a suspect in a book by A.A. Holing.
So this is getting juicy.
His alleged motive was tied to anti-Nazi sentiment.
Anti-Nazi.
Now, the theory was that he might have planted some kind of incendiary device to strike a blow against the Nazi regime,
Okay.
which was using the Hindenburg as a propaganda tool.
Oh, makes sense. Yeah.
It's like something out of a spy thriller.
I know, right?
But is there any hard evidence to back this up?
That's the question. Yeah.
And that's where the sabotage theory starts to unravel a bit.
Oh.
Because despite thorough investigations, no physical evidence of a bomb or any kind of sabotage was ever found. And Spell's connection to any anti-Nazi groups was pretty weak.
So it's a good story,
Yeah.
but maybe not very likely.
So while sabotage is a captivating idea, we need to look at other possibilities.
Yeah, what else is there?
What about something a little more grounded in science?
Okay.
like static electricity.
Static electricity.
The static electricity theory basically says that a buildup of static charge on the airship's skin, made worse by the stormy weather,
Okay. Yeah.
could have played a role in the disaster.
Okay.
Remember those mooring ropes?
Oh, yeah, the ones they used to winch it down.
The ones used to winch the Hindenburg down during the flying war.
Right, right.
Well, the theory is that the ropes might have grounded the metal frame of the airship, but not the outer skin, which was made of fabric and coated with this special dope.
Oh, I see.
So you've got this giant metal skeleton that's grounded.
Yeah.
But the outer skin is basically insulated, creating a perfect scenario for a sudden electrical discharge.
That makes sense.
And there's actually an account from Professor Mark Heald,
Okay.
who was watching the landing. He claims to have seen a blue flame flickering along the airship's back, just moments before the fire erupted.
Interesting.
Now, some experts think that could have been St. Elmo's fire.
St. Elmo's fire.
That electrical phenomenon you sometimes see during thunderstorms.
Oh, right.
And here's another interesting thing.
What's that?
The Graf Zeppelin II,
Okay.
which was built after the Hindenburg,
Yeah.
actually incorporated graphite into its dope
Graphite.
to make it conductive,
Oh, interesting.
potentially to address this very issue.
So they learned from that, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty strong indication that designers took the static electricity theory seriously.
Makes sense.
All right, let's move on to another natural phenomenon that could have been disastrous for the Hindenburg.
Okay. Lightning.
The lightning, okay. Now, we know that the Hindenburg had been struck by lightning before without any problems.
Yeah.
But there's a crucial detail to consider.
What's that?
During its landing,
Yeah.
it was venting hydrogen as ballast.
Venting hydrogen.
Hydrogen, the highly flammable gas that kept the Hindenburg aloft.
Right, yeah.
Releasing that into the air during a potential lightning storm.
Yeah.
Seems like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
But wasn't the weather clear at the time of the disaster?
That's a good point.
That's the main argument against the lightning theory.
Oh, okay.
However, some experts suggest that a small, localized bolt could have occurred
Right.
without being easily noticed.
I guess that's possible.
So it's a possibility,
Yeah.
albeit maybe a less likely one.
Okay.
So we've got sabotage,
Right.
static electricity, and lightning.
Yeah.
But we're not done with the theories yet.
No.
There's one more we need to explore before we wrap up this part of our deep dive.
All right. Lay it on me.
Engine failure.
Engine failure. Okay.
This theory comes from the account of Robert Buchanan,
Buchanan.
a ground crew member.
Okay. Who was helping secure the mooring lines.
Huh?
He claimed to have seen one of the engines backfire,
Oh.
setting out a shower of sparks.
Sparks near hydrogen. Yikes.
And we have a similar account from another ground crew member, Robert Shaw,
Okay.
who saw a blue ring,
A blue ring.
potentially a hydrogen leak,
Uh-huh.
followed by sparks from the engines. Now, these accounts are compelling,
Yeah.
but there are some key counterarguments.
Oh. Like what?
First, tests conducted by the Zeppelin company indicated that hydrogen wouldn't ignite from engine backfires.
Oh, okay.
And second,
Yeah.
and perhaps most importantly,
Okay.
the fire was first observed at the top of the airship,
At the top.
not near the engines.
Oh, so that kind of throws that out then.
Yeah. So we've explored 4 major theories,
Okay.
each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, it's like a detective novel. You know,
it really is.
where the clues don't quite add up. It's
Exactly.
a real head scratcher.
But we're just getting started.
We are. In the next part, we're going to delve into what fueled that inferno.
Oh, okay.
Was it the hydrogen,
Yeah.
the airship's skin,
Right.
or a dangerous combination of both?
I can't wait.
Stay tuned.
All right. Welcome back. You ready to continue our Hindenburg investigation?
Absolutely. I'm hooked.
All right. So last time we talked about what might have sparked the fire, remember?
Yeah, we went through a bunch of theories.
We did. But this time we're going to dive into what fueled that inferno.
Okay, so we're getting into the nitty-gritty of the fire itself.
Yeah, exactly.
So was it the hydrogen inside,
Yeah.
or the airship's fabric skin?
Could have been both.
Or both, right?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think that something as seemingly simple as the material of the airship could play such a huge role in a disaster like this.
It's those little details that often have the biggest impact.
That's right, the stuff you don't always think about.
So let's start with the hydrogen.
All right, good place to start.
We know the Hindenburg was filled with it.
I mean, that's what kept it up in the air, right?
Yeah. Millions of cubic feet of hydrogen.
7 million to be exact.
And hydrogen, as you probably know, is incredibly flammable.
Oh, yeah.
But wasn't the Hindenburg designed to be safe, like, despite the hydrogen?
Well, it was designed with safety in mind, sure, but there's evidence that suggests there might have been some hydrogen leaks even before the fire broke out.
Leaks? Really?
Yeah, for instance, the airship was constantly having this problem where the tail end was dipping lower than it should have been.
Oh, that's not good.
No, it wasn't. It was what they call stern heavy.
So was that a sign of a leak then?
It's definitely possible. And to add to that, you have some eyewitnesses who reported seeing flames coming from the actual gas cells themselves.
Really?
Suggesting the hydrogen was pretty directly involved in the blaze.
Wow. Okay, so that's pretty strong evidence for the hydrogen theory.
It is, but we can't forget about the airship's skin.
Right, the fabric part.
Yeah, and this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ear.
Enter the incendiary paint theory.
Incendiary paint? What's that?
So the Hindenburg skin, it wasn't just plain fabric. It was coated with this special dope to protect it from the elements.
Like a sealant kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now, this dope contained a mix of ingredients, and two of those ingredients were iron oxide and aluminum.
Iron oxide and aluminum?
Yeah.
Isn't iron oxide just rust?
Basically, yeah.
And aluminum, like the stuff you use in a foil?
Yeah.
Those don't sound very flammable to me.
You'd be surprised.
Really?
This combination, when it gets hot enough, can create what's called a thermite-like reaction.
Hold on, thermite. Like the stuff that can melt metal? Are you saying the Hindenburg skin was coated with something that could cause a thermite reaction?
That's the theory, yeah.
Wow. Okay, so who came up with this theory?
A scientist named Addison Bain.
Okay.
He spent years researching the Hindenburg disaster. And he was convinced that this dope, under the right conditions, could have ignited and contributed to how fast the fire spread.
So did he have any evidence to back up this theory?
He did. He actually conducted experiments where he recreated the Hindenburg skin and the dope, and he subjected them to all sorts of tests.
What happened?
Well, the fabric, when exposed to a flame, would ignite and burn really intensely, kind of like a thermite reaction.
Oh, wow. So there's actual experimental evidence to support this.
There is, and there's even more. Bain dug into some historical records and discovered that German scientists who were working for the Nazi regime, they had actually raised concerns about the flammability of the dope before the disaster.
They did, so there were warnings.
Seems like it, yeah. But these findings were allegedly suppressed.
Suppressed?
Yeah, supposedly to avoid embarrassment and protect the reputation of the Hindenburg. You know, the Nazis were using it as a propaganda tool.
Wow, a cover-up. This is getting more and more intriguing.
It is, but like any good mystery, there's always another side to the story.
Oh, what's the other side?
Well, some experts argue that while the skin was definitely flammable, it wouldn't have burned fast enough on its own to account for how quickly the Hindenburg was consumed by fire.
So the speed of the fire is a key piece of the puzzle.
A big one, yeah. And there's also the question of whether the dope actually had enough of the right ingredients to create a true thermite reaction.
Okay, so maybe not full-blown thermite.
Right.
So now we've got Team Hydrogen and Team Incendiary Paint.
Yeah, it's a real showdown.
Both with compelling arguments.
Makes you wonder how we can figure out who's right.
Is there even a way to settle this debate?
Well, actually, remember those Mythbusters guys?
Oh, yeah, I love Mythbusters.
They decided to tackle the Hindenburg mystery themselves.
No way!
Yeah, in one of their episodes.
That's amazing.
They actually recreated the Hindenburg skin.
Really?
Using the same type of fabric and dope and everything.
Wow, that's dedication.
And they put it through a bunch of tests to see how flammable it really was.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did they find?
Well, their findings were pretty interesting.
Okay, don't leave me hanging.
They found that while the Hindenburg skin could burn, it probably wouldn't have burned fast enough on its own to account for how quickly the fire spread.
So does that mean the incendiary paint theory is busted?
Not entirely. They concluded that the hydrogen was most likely the main fuel source.
Okay, that makes sense.
But they also acknowledged that the flammable dope could have acted as an accelerant,
Oh, I
making
see.
the blaze more intense and contributing to its rapid spread.
So it's not a simple either scenario, it's more like a combination of factors.
Exactly. It was a perfect storm of unfortunate events that led to the Hindenburg's fiery demise.
And to really understand the scope of this disaster,
Yeah.
we need to understand a little bit about the physics of fire.
Okay, I'm ready for a science lesson.
Imagine holding a piece of paper over candle flame.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It might take a while for the paper to catch fire.
Yeah.
But once it does, the flames spread quickly.
They do. Why is that?
Because the heat from that initial flame is preheating the surrounding paper.
Oh, I see.
Making it easier to ignite.
So it's like the fire is feeding on itself.
Exactly.
And with the Hindenburg, you've got this massive structure covered in a flammable coating and a huge amount of hydrogen burning inside.
So the heat from that initial ignition would just radiate it outwards,
Exactly.
preheating the fabric and causing this chain reaction of combustion.
Like a domino effect. Each section igniting the next, creating a wall of fire.
And then you have the airship's structure itself.
Right, which wasn't exactly built for this kind of situation.
So once the fire started, the airship's structure couldn't contain it.
Pretty much, the Hindenburg, like all airships, was basically a giant balloon designed to be lightweight and flexible.
But that also means it lacks the structural integrity of, say, an airplane.
Exactly. As the fire spread, the fabric skin would weaken, allowing the flames to get inside and reach those hydrogen-filled cells.
Oh, no.
And once those cells ignited, well, there was no stopping it.
It's like a terrifying chain reaction.
It really is.
The fire weakening the structure,
Yeah.
leading to more hydrogen igniting, and the flames just spreading faster and faster.
A tragic interplay of engineering, physics, and just bad luck.
So it wasn't just the hydrogen or the skin, but also the way they interacted with the overall structure of the airship that caused the fire to spread so quickly?
It was a perfect storm of unfortunate factors, all converging at the worst possible time.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
The science of the fire, the role of the hydrogen, the incendiary paint theory, and how the airship's structure played a part.
Yeah, it's clear there was no single culprit.
It was a whole bunch of things that went wrong.
That's right.
But our deep dive isn't over yet.
No.
In the next part, we'll explore the aftermath of the Hindenburg Disaster,
Okay.
how it impacted the airship era,
Right.
and the lessons we can still learn from this pivotal moment in history.
Can't wait.
Stay with us. All right, welcome back for the final part of our Hindenburg deep dive.
Yeah, this is it.
We've explored the flight, the disaster itself,
All the theories.
and we even dug into the science behind that inferno.
The physics of it all.
But now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the aftermath.
Yeah, the impact of the Hindenburg disaster went way beyond the immediate tragedy.
Exactly, because the Hindenburg wasn't just this technological marvel.
It was a symbol, right?
It was a symbol of human ingenuity and progress.
And its fiery demise sent shockwaves around the world.
It really did.
It shattered that image of invincibility,
It's hard to imagine in today's world with instant news and social media.
Right, everything's so fast now.
But the Hindenburg disaster was one of those events that people experienced in real time.
I guess so, yeah.
Through radio broadcasts and newsreel.
The power of those images.
Those grainy images of the airship engulfed in flames.
Yeah.
Just seared into the public consciousness.
And then you have the radio report by Herbert Morrison, right?
Oh, yeah.
With that anguished, the humanity.
I get chills just thinking about it.
It became the soundtrack to the tragedy.
It really did. Even listening to that recording today. It's just raw emotion.
You could feel it.
It's a reminder of how quickly things can change.
Yeah.
How even the most advanced technology can be vulnerable.
You think that's why it still resonates with people today?
I think so. It taps into that primal fear of the unknown.
That makes sense.
And the Hindenburg disaster had this profound impact on the public's perception of airship travel.
You're right. The airship went from being this, future of luxury transportation
It did.
to being synonymous with danger and disaster.
Almost overnight.
It's like a collective trauma.
That's a great way to put it. The dream of airship travel was essentially extinguished in those flames.
Yeah, the Hindenburg disaster really marked the end of the airship era.
As a viable form of mass transportation anyway.
It's amazing how one single event can change the course of history.
Especially technological history.
It's fascinating.
And it kind of pushed aviation towards heavier than aircraft.
Airplanes, yeah.
Which ultimately became the dominant form of air travel.
And it wasn't just about the public perception, right?
No.
The Hindenburg disaster had a real impact on the development of aviation technology.
So?
Well, the use of hydrogen as a lifting gas, which was always a concern because it's so flammable, came under intense scrutiny after the disaster.
That makes sense.
It really accelerated research into safer alternatives, like helium.
Didn't the United States have a monopoly on helium at that time?
They did, and they weren't keen on sharing it with Germany, especially with the rising tensions in Europe.
So that played a role in the Hindenburg using hydrogen.
It was definitely a factor.
Even though they knew the risks.
It's a reminder that technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. you know?
Right. It's influenced by politics and economics and all these other factors.
Exactly. The Hindenburg disaster was very much a product of its time.
But beyond its impact on technology and geopolitics,
Yeah.
the Hindenburg disaster also serves as this crucial reminder about safety regulations and investigations.
Oh, absolutely. The investigations that followed the disaster were incredibly detailed.
They're very thorough.
Both German and American experts were involved.
They really wanted to get to the bottom of it.
They examined the wreckage, interviewed witnesses, and ran countless experiments.
All to try and figure out the cause.
And while they never could definitively pinpoint what sparked the fire,
Right.
their work led to some important changes in airship design and safety protocols.
So it wasn't all in vain.
Not at all. It's a testament to the power of scientific inquiry,
And learning from our mistakes.
even the really tragic ones.
So as we wrap up our Hindenburg deep dive,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
Well, first, I think it's important to remember that some mysteries may never be fully solved.
That's true.
The Hindenburg is a perfect example of that.
We still don't know for sure what caused the fire.
Even with all the evidence and research and everything else.
It's a reminder that sometimes, despite our best efforts, we may never have all the answers.
And second, I think the Hindenburg disaster really highlights the interplay of technology and human choices.
It's not just about the technology itself.
It's about the people who design it, build it, and use it.
And the decisions they make along the way.
And those decisions can have far-reaching consequences.
Sometimes unintended ones.
Exactly. It's a humbling reminder.
And lastly, I think the Hindenburg disaster teaches us the importance of learning from the past.
Absolutely.
By studying events like this,
Yeah.
we can gain insights into the risks associated with new technologies.
And make better choices in the future.
It's about understanding that progress comes with responsibility.
And learning from our mistakes so we don't repeat them.
The Hindenburg disaster, while a terrible tragedy, also offers us valuable lessons for the future.
About innovation, risk management, and the importance of human judgment in a world that's increasingly reliant on technology.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
I agree.
The Hindenburg disaster was a dark moment in history.
But it also reminds us of our potential.
Our capacity for innovation, but also our vulnerability.
And our need to keep learning and questioning.
Well, thank you for joining us on this journey into the Hindenburg disaster.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you found it insightful.
And maybe even a little bit thought-provoking.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep diving deep into the fascinating world around us.